is there an aha moment in therapy for a lot of people, or is it just a consistent practice that kind of, like exercise, you don't suddenly feel jacked one day, but you are one day, but you don't feel it happening. Is it the same with like a therapy experience?
It can be. And yeah, certainly I've been a part of, and it's always my goal to try to spark those aha moments, because that's really where the magic is. I can say something to someone, but when they're able to kind of make that shift internally and it's asking the right questions and having that trust in that relationship, that's when they really start to make connections for themselves.
YUNKJunk!
Hey everybody, welcome to the YUNKJunk official podcast, where we're trying to promote a lot of businesses here in the Manayunk area. Today we have Justin from Intrins Inq, and we're so happy to have you on the inaugural episode of the YUNKJunk official podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Terry.
Yeah, so I wanted to have you in because I knew that you were relatively new to the area as far as Manayunk, or at least we had done content with you before for Manayunk.com, and I really liked what you had to say, and it seemed like you had an interesting story. So if you could, for the people at home, just kind of tell us, what you're doing here in Manayunk and how you got into your career.
Sure. So I am a psychotherapist and health coach. So Intrins Inq, which is a play on the word intrinsic. So something that is sort of innate to our being. I'm located here in Manayunk. I actually had done my undergrad at the time. It was Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science. So I might be dating myself a little bit there. But so I graduated from Philadelphia University, originally from North Jersey, and as a fashion design major. Always wanted to work in New York. Took a little detour out to Southern California at one point, but then was able to do that, which was really exciting and fun, and was able to cross that off my list. But then, sort of following my passion and just my life journey took me in a different direction. And it led me back to Manayunk. I love Philly. I love this area of the city. It's kind of the best of everything here. Can get into Center City easy, walk in one direction from my house to Main Street and restaurants and businesses, and then the other direction into the Wissahickon Trail. So it's great.
So do you also live in Manayunk?
I live just up the hill, Roxborough, technically, yes.
Oh, a Roxborough boy walking down the hill to Manayunk?
Sliding today.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, isn't that funny, like the amount of accidents that we have? Like Manayunk's awesome, but winter Manayunk, those hills, there's always something bad happening.
Yeah, luckily we've had a reprieve for a couple of years. And anytime anyone that visits me who's not familiar with the area always are like, this is a two-way street? Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
How does this work in the snow?
Yeah, it makes no sense, but we love it. That's why we're here. So that's quite a shift, I would say, in career path. Was there like an inciting incident or anything like that made you decide, you know what, I'm destined to do this instead?
Yeah, interesting sort of plot twist. I sort of use the analogy, it's kind of like Elle Woods, right? Like going from fashion to law. People look at my resume and they're like, how did this happen? Tell me about this. So I actually, I was a head designer for a brand that I love, Paul Frank, and, had seen some of my peers who were in the industry, and some of the things that you hear as stereotypical about the fashion industry are true, and, wasn't quite aligned with my values. And also, kind of started to get into it, just being a creative person, really into self-expression, and just on a computer a lot of the time. But I had been engaged and living with my partner, and that sort of ended. And so then in my healing journey, I had always just been interested in wellness. So I had gone to an open house for the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and just kind of signed up on the spot, didn't know what I was going to do. I was just like, okay, I'm just following my heart. And so I completed that program, became a health coach, decided I wanted to work with the LGBTQ plus community. In doing that work, a lot of folks know sort of healthy habits or what they should be eating. And I often found myself, especially working with my community, that there were other things that they would tell me about that related to their behaviors that I would have to refer out and say like, oh, that sounds like a lot, and that's out of my scope of practice. And, maybe working with a therapist would help you with that. And so I decided, and being in therapy myself, to see if that's something that I wanted to do. So I looked at different programs, took a course at Rutgers, and this was at the time that the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening.
Sure.
So went down there a bunch, and I had been taking a course in social work, and I was like, oh yeah, this is it for me. I'm a social worker. Just continued in that program. I knew that I wanted to work with the queer community. And so I specialized also in substance use, kind of combining that with, wellness and behavior change. And so I was just continued along that path, my licensure process. I was able to work for sort of a dream job at the Mazzoni Center. They were starting a substance use intensive outpatient program, which was what I had been working with in the substance use space. So was able to launch that program there. Was really amazing opportunity. I had always wanted to be in private practice, so continued along that path as well. And then opened Intrins Inq just before pandemic happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is great time. But I'm sure you were able to provide service through Zoom.
Yes.
So how has that been navigating, as someone who is a therapist? Everyone's always like preaching better help and like those kinds of things. How is that compared to the in-person experience?
I was hesitant or skeptical at first. I had some clients that I was working with and been working with in person. So the transition was a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. They were already comfortable with me. After becoming comfortable with it myself, was able to figure out how to sort of bridge that technological divide through the screen. And I find it really is, it's dependent on what the client is comfortable with. I mean, there's obvious convenience factors that are really helpful. Some of my clients also just, are hybrid based on other, conflicts, scheduling issues. And some just really prefer, the in-person experience. Some prefer telehealth. So yeah, I guess it's really client specific. Mm-hmm. And I'm able to kind of adapt and work with that. I still really enjoy the in-person experience. There's sort of different information that you get. But there's sort of information that you get about a client that has a comfort level with just being on telehealth too.
So who needs a therapist? And when is it appropriate to reach out?
I think anyone can benefit from therapy. I think, a lot of the stigma around mental health has decreased. And I think that's maybe one of the few benefits of pandemic, is that people realize the necessity and that they maybe could benefit from it. And so, I'm glad that some of those barriers have been lowered for folks, and there's less stigma around it. I think people talk about it much more openly. And so I think that for a lot of folks was a big barrier.
Well, what's crazy is all of the, is that a bad word?
What's that?
Crazy. Yeah.
Depends on the context, but.
What's wild, we'll say, is that every podcast that I kind of listen to has a, mental health capacity, like mental health cell in it. There's an advertisement for it. So that's the thing that really had me thinking that it was normalized, is it's in every advertisement I've ever seen. So I think you're right. I mean, clearly the pandemic definitely had an effect on people being open discussing it, because certainly it wasn't something you discussed in the 90s, back where I'm from. Yeah. But so you have a specialty though, or at least a special sector that you're trying to work with. How did you fall into that? And, what are the kind of services you're providing to that demographic?
Well, it really started again with my own healing journey. Mm-hmm. as therapists, we talk about this concept of the wounded healer, right? And so as we, heal ourselves, we understand how to create that space and change process for others. I won't say that I heal others, in doing the health coaching work, just tried different sort of branding and marketing, different audiences that seemed to make sense. And I just sort of landed on the LGBTQ plus community. It's something, that was pretty impactful to my experience. I understand it really well. I feel really passionate and committed to supporting the health of that community. So again, with the opportunity from the Mazzoni Center, was really able to be immersed in the community in that way, and just confirmed for me, that was where I wanted to dedicate my energy. I speak about that as one aspect of my identity, but I also like to say that I work with empaths, entrepreneurs, the creatives, and the queer community. And I think there's different aspects of my identity that I relate to others. So I actually have a fairly diverse clientele base in terms of different ages, backgrounds, socioeconomic factors, race, things like that.
Can we go into the empath one?
Sure.
Because this has popped up, certainly in my life. There are empaths in my life, and I find it challenging to have conversations with them because to me, they're talking like they're an X-Man, like they have like a special power. And I'm trying to figure out how to communicate through that, because to me, I'm just like, it's not that I don't believe it. It's that it's that when they describe it like a superhero and like they have powers or were bitten by a radioactive empathy bug.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can relate to that. And I guess I would say sometimes it feels like a superpower and sometimes it feels like a kryptonite. Yes. So it can be draining. It's, incredibly useful to be able to relate to other people, to understand, certainly as a therapist, it is definitely a superpower. And also, it's draining, sort of absorbing all of this energy. And it's not something you can really turn off. It's something that you just are. And you have to figure out how to work with it. And similarly, like as a therapist or like any empath, you have to figure out how to recharge. How can I protect my energy? So it's a double-edged sword.
So walk me through that specifically of the idea of what an empath is that I feel other people's feelings, right?
Yes.
And you feel it within to the point that it can be crippling if you're around someone who is, I'm going to say negative Nancy, but that's not the right word. But they can be drained and physically drained. So, in my experience, there's someone in my life who says she always has to recharge her social battery. So what is she talking about when it comes to that?
Yeah. We all have different capacities for that. And there's layers, right? Like, we may also be introverted on top of being an empath, which means my battery is maybe, less than others. So it's really knowing your capacity, which changes, it varies. And knowing what you need to do to protect that, to recharge, and being able to say no. I mean, I think boundaries are a big part of being an empath. Not always easy. Again, it's layered. Sometimes an empath can also be a people pleaser. So I give too much out, right?
Yeah.
And certainly as a therapist, that's something I have to find a good balance with myself. I can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so that's something that I think is helpful for an empath as well.
How do you teach boundaries?
I don't know if
Do you? I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah. I don't know if I teach it. I provide psychoeducation, if you will, I guess semantics a little bit.
Sure.
But I like to think of it rather than, sort of, I have this knowledge that I'm going to bestow upon you. It's kind of like, I'm going to share this information and find out how you relate to it, how you can apply it, how it might be helpful. And so, it might sort of come up naturally in challenges that clients are bringing up. It might be sort of a theme or a pattern that we work on. It can look like different things between, kind of trying to strategize around how can we be more boundaried with this person? How can we adjust our boundaries with different people? To even modeling that with the client, whether it's through some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm blanking.
on boundary?
Well, I'm blanking on role play. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
We might do some role play around what's this conversation going to look like. If they really need some like concrete lived experience and like, oh, I was able to do that with my therapist. That's great. Just modeling, right? And so having good boundaries with my clients. I'm going to maybe give a little bit of information about myself that is appropriate and helpful for them. But they might also ask some personal questions that I'm going to be a little bit more boundaried around. And, that's a different kind of relationship.
Well, I instantly go to What About Bob with Bill Murray. That's like the ultimate representation of needing boundaries.
I'm not as familiar. But...
So it's Bill Murray plays a patient who follows his therapist on vacation and gets involved in everything and is just asking him a million questions and clearly has gone well past the patient-client relationship.
Yeah.
You should watch it. I think you'd enjoy it.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned was specifically with boundaries is entrepreneurs, that you work with entrepreneurs. Now, I feel that a lot of us don't have our fences up when it's time to do real work and therefore can't get it done because you're being bombarded with others. So that's what I really identify with when it comes to boundaries and whatnot. But, you mentioned entrepreneurs there's certainly this audience and certainly a group that you work with. What do entrepreneurs really need in addition to kind of what I said with boundaries? And, how can they take care of themselves? What are some problems that they're dealing with? I hit you with like 9 questions there, but
it depends, I guess, on sort of the set of issues and history that any client brings. Trying to think about some of the entrepreneurs that I work with. Certainly, boundaries, I'd say in my experience working with clients, it's often boundaries with themselves.
Really?
Not always with others. It can be. Certainly can relate to that in terms of sort of over-functioning, overdoing. Maybe if you're a perfectionist, I also have a lot of clients who identify in that way. Hard to let go and delegate. But yeah, I think also I'm guilty of this. Sort of being an entrepreneur, it's helpful to be structured with your time. Yeah. It can be really easy for things to get, loose and gray and, I'm kind of working all the time. And also, if I have the sense that I'm working all the time, then maybe I'm procrastinating because I'm feeling overwhelmed or, I kind of feel like I deserve like this little break or whatever it is. So I guess I would say some of the clients that I work with, it's helpful for them to be a little bit more disciplined with themselves and to, I think, separate a little bit from their professional and personal selves, which I think as an entrepreneur can also be a hard thing to do. In my case, it is also hard because in some ways I am the product, right? I'm the therapist. I'm selling myself. You're working with me. And although there's a part of me that's sort of the guide on the side and it's not about me and I take myself out of the equation, common thing that we talk about as a therapist is it's often the quality of the relationship between you and the client that is really the most transformative. So in some ways, they have to feel as though they can connect with you on a really real level.
Yeah. Do you have any tools or way that you generate trust with your patients that come in?
Yeah. It takes time, and it depends again on their comfort level with that. Having worked in the substance use space, certainly am very familiar with folks who don't have a lot of trust. And so that was really good, really helpful for me.
Why is that? Why don't they have trust?
It's hard to say any one reason, but yeah, I would say broadly, folks who have some substance use as part of their experience, they've just had instances, relationships, events where they couldn't trust whoever it was. Sometimes a parent, sometimes a partner. Yeah, hard to pinpoint any one thing as to why, but just broadly, generally, that's a common theme for a lot of folks. And yeah, I would say the trust building starts even before, like, it's at first contact. Someone emails me, I try to be really responsive, try to demonstrate through email, or I offer like a complimentary telehealth consultation just to kind of see how we vibe and if we're a good fit. And so, yeah, I'm building trust from the very beginning, try to be transparent, try to be welcoming, try to just be a person as well. So, yeah, I think finding a way to be authentic and connect, but again, being appropriate as a professional, that it's not about me either.
Yeah, with the other company that we have, the Video Content Factory, it's very physician focused. So, we have a lot of conversations with physicians and whatnot, and they're often talking about how important the buy-in is of the patient, of like, you're not going to go anywhere with anything unless they're invested and want to be a part of it. So that just seems like that would be a bigger challenge for someone in your shoes, who kind of, I'm guessing, has to like get beneath the surface for folks you're talking about, and that might take a lot of time. What is that? Is there an aha moment in therapy for a lot of people, or is it just a consistent practice that kind of, like exercise? You don't suddenly feel jacked one day, but you are one day, but you don't feel it happening. Is it the same with like a therapy experience?
It can be. And yeah, certainly I've been a part of, and it's always my goal to try to spark those aha moments, because that's really where the magic is. I can say something to someone, but when they're able to kind of make that shift internally, and it's asking the right questions and having that trust in that relationship, that's when they really start to make connections for themselves. And yeah, it depends. It can take time. It can be, pretty initial often. So I'm an outpatient. So my clients are typically motivated. They're coming knowing that they're ready, that they kind of know what they want to work on. And so from that perspective, they're there, they're wanting to do the work. Might not always be comfortable work.
Yeah.
And, it's also a matter of knowing when to step on the gas and when to ease up, and working with them to find that. Yeah, the aha moments are just always, really inspiring. It helps keep me going. And yeah, unfortunately, therapy isn't like a spa treatment. You don't always come out of there feeling good. Often my clients will say they feel some like relief or lighter. But yeah, it's uncomfortable work sometimes. But yeah, I think when they're working with someone that feels that they're understood and seen and safe, then, we can kind of go to those places together.
And then the third kind of demographic you mentioned was creatives. That was really interesting for me to hear. So, because I work with creatives all the day. I certainly am guilty of, I've pushed a creative too far. I haven't pushed a creative hard enough. I've been outsmarted. There's a million things in our world. What are some of the big struggles that creatives seem to be having?
Yeah, I being a creative person myself, working in design, I'm familiar with sort of the personality type, which can be kind of emotional, can maybe have some ego, and to varying degrees, right? Like sometimes too much, sometimes not enough.
Agreed.
I would say typically the folks that I work with, and for whatever reason, maybe it's sort of what I bring to the table, or again, sort of the overlap in sort of these different aspects of identity. I think certainly, maybe identifying as part of the LGBTQ plus community is part of it, but often there's sort of this feeling of less than, not enough, maybe getting a sense of either connection or worth or validation through their work. And because our creative work can often be sort of part of our own self-expression, there's this blurred line of like, what is me and what is my work? And I over-identify with it. So I think those are some of the things that a lot of my clients bring.
Yeah, definitely the self-worth being tied to your creative spirit. When you are in client work, there is going to be a conflict there. And this seems like something that is just, you don't ever want to kill a creative spirit, but there has to be the conversation of, this isn't your video. Right. Someone paid for this, and they want it to be this way. I get we have this great vision of like, hyper-specific David Fincher-esque shots, but they want to walk down the street with someone and show that they're friendly. That has always been my big thing, is that you got to remember when you're in client work, you're in client work, which is why I think it's important. Any creative agency, not just ours, has moments of fun and levity and moments where go ahead and work on what you want. And the reason and when I say work on what you want, I don't care if it's like, a bunch of like toilet humor, and we've had Dylan, our producer, like in the bathroom doing like these kinds of shots where, watch it, it's on the Instagram, it's really funny. But basically it's like, we had to express that. We had to do something that was just nuts and had nothing to do with anything, might even make sales go down, but we had to do it. And the reason is that's our expression. So whenever I onboard something, I try and say, just remember 85% of this is going to be client facing. And we have a rule of kind of like, everyone should be proud of the first cut. Everybody involved should be so thrilled we turned in something that we really believed in. And if it gets torn to by, a marketing director or something like that, just remember we made that. We made that one. That one's ours. Then it's time to switch gears and say, okay, let's this is what they're paying for. Maybe we got 80% of the way there and they don't like the last 20, but for whatever reason, the editor is precious on that last 20. And then it's like, okay, let's just enjoy the first draft. That was ours. That was great. We're all proud of that. That's going in the portfolio. Now let's make it what the client wants. And I think that's probably, I can speak from experience of, I used to really be that way. And at one point you got to let it go, which kind of goes into my next question of, for me, it's creativity balanced with, the entrepreneur, balanced with business, right? For you, it's probably caregiving balanced with business. How do you make that work in your mind, and how do you make that work in your business where you don't forget about the business itself?
Yeah. I think, having worked in the field, some years. That was really helpful. Again, speaking about boundaries, I would take client stuff home, right, as an empath.
Sure.
And just be like really drained at the end of the day or the week. And then, you kind of do that for several years, right? And it kind of becomes something you can adjust to, of like, okay, when I'm at work, I keep it at work. I can be really present and in the moment, and I'm giving you 100% of my attention and care. And also I need to turn that off. I have to take care of the business stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoy the business stuff as well. Having come from design, really familiar with sort of marketing and what you're talking about, working towards a brief and, delivering, what the client needs, not what I think the client needs. I enjoy the business part probably just as much. And so in that way, I guess it's a little less challenging for me to not get too bogged down with sort of the therapy and the all the feelings all the time.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to sort of being able to sustain this, is like, okay, I can feel all the feelings, and also I need to put that aside, compartmentalize that, let that go. And, now I have to take care of whatever it is in terms of billing or record keeping, and, putting myself out there. I have to constantly be being visible in some kind of way. I don't work with insurance companies. So I have to find ways that clients find me, which also is really something that I enjoy, because being someone interested in social issues and, in the LGBTQ plus community, there's certainly lots of activism and just advocacy that's part of that. So, I enjoy being able to just speak about things that I'm passionate about. Having worked in the substance use space, just sobriety has been something that I've really been passionate about for a long time. And then almost 2 years ago, I have been sober myself.
I was going to ask, because I saw the shirt.
Yeah.
So 2 years.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I feel great.
Yeah.
So I did a dry January, right? Which here we are. It's very popular 2 years later. I just sort of set the intention of, okay, pandemic, things got a little, maybe more than I would have liked.
Sure.
Like a lot of folks. So let me just do this reset. And also as someone with anxiety, I then, after having done the 30 days, had returned for maybe 2 months and was able to compare. And I was like, oh, wow, I felt so much better not drinking.
You mean mentally?
Yeah.
Or just physically?
All
Mentally
of the above.
Interesting.
Yeah. Emotionally, physically, my anxiety was so much better. And so, after the 2 months of returning, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and just not drink and see how that goes. And it's just been so much better for me. It'll be almost 2 years. I have to feel all of the feelings, right? I already felt a lot of feelings, but now I don't have anything that I might sort of use to sort of escape or dull them. That's human. It's not always easy. It's something that I feel so much better about myself, and especially with my community. I think it's something that, our spaces are often bars, clubs.
You're talking LBG.
Yeah. So LGBTQ plus spaces are often, very saturated with substances, whatever they are, or for many of us, finding community is in those spaces. Maybe when we're in college, that's how I found,
Sure.
sort of understanding my identity at that time. And that's not always the most healthy, helpful, or appropriate kind of spaces or habits that some of us, kind of get used to.
So would you say you've gone into sobriety, or are you just in an extended period of not drinking? Because that's like a new thing that's cropped up, which I'll do a month pretty frequently, but just recently I went for a 3 month. And it was nice. You do get more done. And but I also wouldn't feel comfortable going into a place where people are actually searching for true sobriety, just because I don't think I would be effective to like be in their space, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Talking about go like something like an AA or something like that. That I see as like, this is a disciplined sobriety. But then there's other people who can just turn it off for a while.
Yeah.
I see them as two different things. What are your thoughts?
I agree. For myself, having worked in substance use treatment and understanding recovery, and when someone has that diagnosis, I have a great respect for that community and the work that one has to do in order to remain sober. And so I say that I am someone who is sober. I don't say that I'm a person in recovery, because that distinction just makes sense for me. And like I said, it's more out of respect for knowing what people who identify as being in recovery, what that experience is like. So that's why my shirt says Sober Curious, because I think that opening up that space for a lot of people is really helpful. I feel like people haven't felt like that's been something as accessible. And maybe haven't considered that as an option. And I think that trend has been really growing. Just to be curious of like, what is it like if I just am sober for a little bit, if I don't have any substances, or I just shift my relationship with this substance that seems problematic, but maybe this substance, is something that, every once in a while I'm okay with, right? And I think just that experiment, just that curiosity is a really helpful thing for folks to uncover, whatever can be helpful for them. I really love this term Sober Curious and the awareness around it, and sort of this space being available to more people just to try it on and see what they get out of it.
Well, it's physically more available. We have sober bars, we have sober clubs, we have a lot of really interesting thing that's popped up in the past like 5 years. Our friends at Unity Recovery and Unity Yoga launched what is it, the Volstead. Yeah. We did the photos for it. Launched the Volstead. I thought that was one of the coolest things to come to Manayunk in a long time, because it's an option. Yeah. Even for, if I want to have a business meeting, that can be kind of tricky, because my go-to is like, hey, let's go get a drink and let's talk about it. And I'm doing that twice a week, minimum just for sales purposes and whatnot. But that is an all new way to do it, of even just having an option. Hey, do you want to meet at the Goat Spirit, or do you want to meet at the Volstead? Then I'm not even questioning. I'm not putting someone in an uncomfortable position. Yeah. So that alone, I think, has done wonders. Even for me. I'm like, I got to get up early tomorrow, but also sales Terry has a cocktail, Yeah. So it's nice to be able to get a mocktail somewhere in town. And this is brought to you by the Volstead, apparently. But we didn't have it. I think we might be similar ages, but 10 years ago, not a chance. There wasn't a sober bar or anything like that to go to. Yeah. And certainly if there was, it was not looked at as, oh, this is an option. It was looked at as that is the only option for certain people. Right. So I just think we've come a long way in that world. I never thought that world would really change, but it's happening, And if you've never had a mocktail, Dylan, you've made a mocktail before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dylan used to be a bartender, and mocktails are fantastic. You know what? We should start offering them here for this show. We should have a bar right there, mocktail or cocktail. Perfect.
I find that, since I've been sober and making mocktails, I get like more into the mixology of it, right? Because it's more about the flavor and the experience and the craft of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel like I've gotten more into that being sober than I was when I was drinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like you said, it's the flavors. You know, there was Tim Ferriss has a book, The 4-Hour Chef, and like the first part of it is that we have to teach you what flavors are because you don't know. So he's like, put a bunch of ingredients in a bowl and just taste them, and then have like lemon between, so you know what salt actually tastes like, what pepper actually tastes like. So I'm sure it's similar on the mocktail journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if we think of it as like a reset too, right? Like if you had a maybe problematic relationship with alcohol, you probably weren't doing it for the flavor profile. You were doing it for the effect, right?
Yeah.
And so then maybe that with that reset that you experience, right, you're able to sort of maybe shift that relationship. But yeah, I think having all of these options out there, I'm an ambassador for Athletic Brewing. I like the taste of beer, and I like being able to have the taste of craft beer without the effect. And so that was really helpful for me, is like all of these options out there, where the flavors and the the just experience of it, to be able to go to a place like the Volstead where it feels elevated, and it feels comfortable, right? And no one has to ask any questions. Everyone can go there and, not have to disclose anything about themselves.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, having spaces wherever that is, I think is really helpful. And certainly, talking about like networking, I think this is something, my clients talk about who are sober, that can get tricky, right? For a lot of entrepreneurs as well. Networking and having business meetings, to be able to have mocktail options, with all the different non-alcoholic options out there. I feel like every, good restaurant should have something on their menu besides like a, pineapple spritzer or whatever.
But also like the bartenders, like Dylan would know. Like if someone just said, make me something, but take the alcohol out of it, like he would know to make something more interesting, where a lot of people used to just not know.
Yeah.
It used to be a world of O'Douls, right. And that was very obvious. But I do have a trick for people who are, if you have to network and you have to spend time in those areas. One thing is, if you just go early and grab Heineken Zero and just have them put it in a glass before the person comes, you can have a conversation with your bartender and just say, when this is empty, I will take another the zero in the glass. Yeah. And then it's just happening and has nothing to do with the engagement that you're about to have. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I do. I think there's a Heineken Zero in the fridge there. But you might have just turned me on to Athletic. Is that a Philly brand?
No, they're based out of Connecticut.
Oh, they're out of here. No, I'm kidding.
Based out of Connecticut. They're sort of the most widely distributed, biggest player in the space. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the varieties of flavors that they have are top notch. So definitely check those out. You can get them at Volstead or Fat Lady. And so, yeah, being able to go out wherever it is,
yeah.
And still enjoy that is great.
Yeah.
And, you sort of mentioned, I think it's, we were talking about stigma earlier.
Sure.
Right? And yeah, I think it depends on, whatever comfort level you have, right? So as a therapist and as someone who's passionate about, the benefits of sobriety, I try to like reduce that stigma. And so just talk about it openly, like, I'm sober and I am going to proudly display, my non-alcoholic beer when I'm going out. And, I think that's a good thing that, with it being sort of more available, that more people talk about it as like, yeah, that's a great option. Yeah. And, that's the funny thing. And for some people, sure, they might not feel comfortable disclosing that and sort of, I think the assumption, which is bizarre, right, is that like if you're not drinking, that you have a problem, yeah. Right? But like, that's a healthy choice.
Yeah, I mean, it should be as simple as I got to go to work in the morning. and I hate working with a headache.
Yeah.
Or something like that, because, when you get to be an old timer like me, you feel one beer the next day. You just do. Yeah. And you're not operating at 100%. But, for me, it's kind of like it is definitely still something for celebration in my head. And it is, a tool in business. And then sometimes, doing something like this, whether it be, a podcast, or you're on a date with your significant other or something, or you're out with their parents, for example, that just makes it makes things easier, But now, and I've done this with, my girlfriend's parents, I've done sober months and ordered an NA in front of someone. And what's interesting is 9 times out of 10, a lot of the bars say, well, we're out of these 3. And it's because everyone else is doing this too now. Like, it's not a thing anymore. You just decide what you want to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, finding your why around it is really helpful to sustain it too, right? And so for me, and something I talk about with a lot of my clients, because we're working on mental health, is like, it's really helpful to sort of stabilize and decrease your symptoms, right? For me, my anxiety was so much better not drinking, and so that's my why. I know that like mental health is much better, that way. And so for whatever it is, and like that's, with athletic, right? They sort of take the angle of like, you are fitness oriented, right?
Yeah.
And you know that it's going to impact you negatively if you're trying to go and run a race the next day, but you still want to go out and, be social. I think a lot of people, it is still a social norm. It's something you associate with a special occasion or something to celebrate, right? And it's still nice to be a part of and to be able to be in those spaces and have an option like that.
It's so funny that we talk about stigma and things, because when I was coming up, there were all the things that you would have gotten teased for. And these are like, like we have a whole comic book show in there and a video game show. Like, you can be public with that in school and whatnot. But what happened, and this happened to a lot of guys that I've talked to, like my current friend group are a bunch of like, meathead bro dudes, but they're all secret nerds. We all just built armor around it so that, yeah, we are a bunch of dorks, and we are going to talk about the intricacies of Jack Kirby back in the day, and why Mega Man X2 is the best Super Nintendo game. But if you try and talk to us or something like that, like, I'm the small one in my group. Like, this is like one of my best friends is 6'4", 275, and just loves Pokemon on the Game Boy, and we'll talk to you about it forever. But he literally built this giant mass of muscle so that he could protect the thing he really liked. And I think that's less necessary. Now, I tend to think it was kind of a benefit of something pushing you to go in the gym, but now it's probably a lot better. I'm sure there's like nerd gyms, where you can go and happily celebrate that stuff. But coming up, like, you wear a Spider-Man t-shirt, you're going to get knocked out.
Yeah, I think certainly with like social media too.
Yeah.
There's all of these different niches and communities and ways that we can show up as our authentic self and, really sort of celebrate that and kind of find ways to integrate that, right? Like, we're not one dimensional. We have different sort of layers and sides to us, right? And so, yeah, maybe it's okay that I'm kind of a geek and I, enjoy going to the gym, right? Both of those things can coexist. And also I can find other people that are similar, right?
For all the bad that bad press social media gets, there's not a lot of good press about, if you just follow the people and things you're interested in, you're only going to be fed that. I think a lot of people, I think it's when, messaging gets to you and you didn't sign up for those messages. But if you sign up for those messages and you just kind of say, I'm interested in these 3 things, and I'm just going to follow people who are interested in those 3 things. And if they veer off of those 3 things, I'm going to leave. I think that's a very healthy way to do it and to form a new community. I think that's the great thing about it. I'm sure you have a host of reasons why social media is terrible, but don't let me put words in your mouth. What are your thoughts towards social media and creating a community and or being influenced?
Yeah. I think like a lot of folks, maybe some conflicted feelings around it. I think like a lot of things too, it's how you use it, right? And so, your intentionality with a lot of things makes a difference. So, and, also like bad habits, we can find that things sort of shift into an area that we maybe, it's problematic for us, right? And so, I would say, we can use it intentionally. We can also sort of rely on it in ways that are unhelpful for us. And you can work with a therapist to figure the difference out. But yeah, as a business owner, I have to have a presence. And also, I'm not always consistent with that because you know what? I'm a person too, and sometimes I just need a break and it's too much. And, I can't always just be generating content. And then there's periods where like, the creative side of me just finds that really stimulating and enjoyable. Yeah, I think certainly for younger generations too. I work with a platform that specifically works with college and university students. And so I'd say, yeah, there's a generational sort of difference as well. Yeah, I'm not on the TikTok. I don't know anything about that world, but I know the kids spend hours on it.
Yep. Anytime you put a "the" in front of a social media, it has a connotation. And I just realized it also works if you put a "the" in front of kids. The teens, the kids. You've immediately broken out of that. So I have some entrepreneurship questions for you. You are interesting because it relies on physically you and you, the person. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of delegation. So how do you structure your day to even get everything done?
As someone with anxiety and OCD, I try to use those to my advantage. And so, yeah, I, have a schedule, blocks of time. And so,
is it physically like in your phone? Do you see the blocks of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty, reliant on my Google Calendar. And yeah, I'll just kind of have some general time blocks, and see, okay, this I can plug in there. And that really helps me with routine and rhythm. And, yeah, that's a really helpful thing. So yeah, I would say time blocking on my schedule. And, I don't always get to everything and that's okay. But
that probably took a while to get to it being okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's still something that isn't always okay.
Hey, man.
The to-do list is always longer and gets carried over to the next day, but that's okay. I accept that. But yeah, it's sort of a balance. And, talking about these things, working with clients is also helpful for me. It's also an interesting mirror sometimes, right?
Oh, that I see. So the conversation itself, you mean?
Yeah. So, because a lot of the clients that I work with identify with me and the things that I work on myself, the things that I also am trained in and understand to help others with. It's really interesting, sitting in front of a client and I'll find myself saying something and be like, that's really good advice. I should probably do that a little bit more myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always an interesting and helpful thing in working with clients is that they're a mirror. Yeah, it helps me kind of stay on track and also sometimes, yeah, that balance piece of like, okay, calm down with the to-do list. It's all right. You'll get
You know what else is nice about that? Because we have it in film shoots is, hey, you're here. Like, this is what you're doing for the next 4 hours. Like, there's times I could literally turn my phone off for those 4 hours that we're doing, the shoot. And that feels great because even if you have a million things to do, you have to do this and you have to be present for this. Or guess what? Your client's going to notice. And the work's going to suffer. It always suffers if a distracted mind, insert analogy or clever statement here. But it's nice because it gives you a reprieve. I kind of switched into kind of like a CEO role for a while, and now have gone back into production, and it's nice because I have to stop. I have to stop to prep for the shoot. I have to physically do the shoot, and I have to like drive back. Like I could take calls in the car, but at the same time, it's just a nice break. So I get obsessive with time blocks and how people structure their day and finding what's optimal. I have it like down to the day. I have to like send out a proposal, do something creative, work on this, check in with the team. And I also know what time of day I have to do everything, And, I'm a fitness guy too. So I got to wake up, start walking immediately and just kind of let my mind ruminate. And then I have an hour to just what's the most important creative thing. So I might be redesigning the website or writing a script as I did this morning or something of that nature. But I know if this isn't done by the time I by the time I go to the gym, it's going to be an issue. Like I'm not going to finish it the rest of the day. So I have to be, like the walk will generate the creativity, and then I will have creative block, which is labeled in blue, by the way. And then it goes to the gym, and the gym block is yellow. And then it's like, okay, now I can go in because I accomplished one thing. I'm huge on the one thing rule of like, no matter what, if you just got the one thing done, you have made progress. If you got halfway done 5 things, you didn't do anything. You didn't, let me rephrase, you didn't finish anything. And a lot of those things will remain unfinished, so I am obsessive with schedule. So I always ask people like how they structure their day. Yeah. Because I want to know, am I alone in the world?
Yeah, no, I find that interesting. And you're speaking my language, color coding, live for that. Are you an eat the frog kind of a person? Do you know that?
Eat the frog?
Yeah.
Tell me.
I've heard that. The idea is, you said, accomplish one thing.
Yeah.
For some of us who can kind of get in our own way, the idea with eat the frog is you do the hardest thing first.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
Get that out of the way, get a sense of accomplishment, and then it's not sort of looming for you.
It's funny. I suppose I used to do that, and I do that at times. But I also know if I don't do something creative in the morning, it's not going to happen that day. So I got to push the frog back a little bit. Let me lick on this toad for a bit, and then I'll eat the frog as my first thing I do when I get in, right? And that's always been the case, whether I'm trying to teach myself piano or something, it's like, it's got to be that 1 hour time block. And I will be so proud of myself when I have like 3 1-hour time blocks where I've accomplished things in a day. But I know, totally believe in eating the frog. And a lot of people never eat the frog. They keep putting it off and putting it off, maybe because you're scared of it, because it's the biggest thing. But when I think of it as like we're the video content factory is the other company. This is YUNKJunk. But if I think of it as literally I have to pull this lever or the assembly line will stop, it's easier for me to justify it. So I go creative, hit the gym, pull lever 1, communications, and then I got to go for a walk because I'm sure something set me off in an email or in a phone call,
Right.
Well,
that's great. Yeah. I mean, I think it's important for us to know sort of what our flow is and structure, if we can, structure our time in that way. You're also speaking about, sort of some of the realities and responsibilities of either being an entrepreneur or in some kind of role where you really have a lot of moving parts to coordinate, right? Yeah. And so you have to figure out how that flow can work for you and also be effective in that way. And I really love what you said about sort of being present, right? And so that's a whole modality called mindfulness, right? And where we're really just focused on being in the present moment because we can kind of get stuck in our head and that can really get in our way a lot.
Yeah. And then you have, machines like Dylan over there who he comes in, blasts through everything. It's like there's not a distraction I don't understand it. We're very lucky to have a great podcast producer like him because, some people just have that gift. I think a lot of musicians have that gift because there comes a point where you just got to play. Whether you're ready or not, you're on stage. Go. And I think, I don't know, maybe approaching life like you're on stage sometimes can help you get things done faster. But who knows? I mean, everybody has their own way of doing it. And I always find it so interesting. The people who are structureless and still get everything done, I don't know what the hell that is. I don't understand it, but I've seen it, and it's amazing to me. But then, you know, I always tell a story. I did a day in the life documentary of this surgeon and president of this company that I really admire, and I just felt totally and utterly outclassed, and it felt wonderful because I was around someone who was better than me at everything, including things I will never be able to do. I'll never be able to do surgery, ever. This guy did it, and then he was being a better teacher than I'll ever be, and then a better father than I'll ever be, and I was just like, this feels great. This feels great that I am completely incapable of doing anything at this level. You know, it just made me garner this respect and happiness about life to see someone succeeding like that. I wish more people thought that way. I know it's more common to tear someone down, but just look at what some people are doing with like awe and amazement, because it's incredible when you see one of these super beings actually doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, what I love about that too is I find a lot of my clients have really high expectations of themselves, right? And their inner critic is just constantly, you know, chattering in their ear. And you know, I think that that comparison, right? That's what I was hearing in part of what you were saying about like, you know, being able to see this person functioning at this high level and in their sense of flow, which is very different than your own.
Yeah.
And being okay with that, right? And just being able to acknowledge sort of, you know, your gifts and his capabilities, and they're different, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I like wonder. I like that there's like something greater than us. You know, I like seeing, you know, absolute titans of industry do things, you know, because it's just incredible to me. It's just incredible to see a brain function like that. And when you see it effortlessly, it's just like, I'm just going to go to bed because this guy's got everything. It's good. We're all in safe hands because this person's around. You'll see that in kids sometimes too. Like, you know, we do work for a lot of schools, for a lot of private schools, and you'll just meet some of these, you know, 7th graders who are speaking better than college kids that I remember. You know, it's just, in this world, there is so much to see and so much amazement there. It's like, it's not boring. The world is not boring.
I mean, that's part of what is great and, you know, keeps it interesting for me as a therapist, is because I just find people really interesting, and just being curious about that. And yeah, kids are great, to see some of that, just pure, you know, expression. Sometimes they just don't have a sense, that self-consciousness, you know, and they're just kind of in that flow and they're just being themselves. And there's a lot to be said for trying to maintain that for ourselves too. Yeah.
So that is a good point, and I like the way you put that. For you know, our Manayunk business community, you know, what are you kind of looking for in regards to clientele? You know, what are you looking for us to do as a community together? I just feel like there's so much opportunity. What would you ask from your community, and what would you want to tell your community about Intrins Inq?
Gosh, that's a good question. I love this community. I feel really at home here. You know, having lived in different places and you know, had some different careers, it was really, I knew this is where I wanted to come back to and root myself. And so it really feels like my home, and that's a really great feeling. And I've been involved with the Manayunk Development Corp. I've been on the committee to help organize the Out and About Festival. You know, I love all of the inclusive visibility that the community has. I love all of the independent businesses that are here. There's a real sense of community among the business owners and supporting one another. And I think that spirit is fantastic. I love that about this community. When I was in undergrad here was the time when all of the chain stores moved in, like the Pottery Barn and the Banana Republic. And, they did some great renovations of these spaces, but I love that, these spaces now have like urban burb in there, right?
Yeah.
And the spirit of Main Street has more of that community feel to it. And yeah, being a social worker, community is something I, really value. And so, yeah, I've been just getting involved with and building relationships with other business owners in the community, supporting each other and the diversity. And yeah, I have a sense that a high tide lifts all boats, right? And so how can we lift one another up, support one another, advocate for one another, have this be a thriving community where everyone is welcome? And, having myself as a visible queer person in the community, knowing that, my space on Gay Street, that my clients feel comfortable here and there's other businesses that they feel comfortable supporting. So, would want other business owners to know that, the diversity is a strength for us. And when we are able to bring sort of more people into the community and when those communities feel welcomed here, we all do better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more. And, Jane Lipton and Mark Jaraday definitely had a, big push towards inclusivity, and they started out and about. And it was funny. I did an ad for Mark back in the day for Manayunk Chambers, and I remember we were blocking it out, and it was kind of like, okay, we'll have this couple go in here, this couple go in here, and Mark says, well, let's put let's put two men in one of them as a couple. And I was like, sure, if that's what you want to do, absolutely. It was a nothing for me. We're video producers, we'll do anything. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then after people saw it, I thought it was really cool that like the MDC and people were resharing that based on that we included that one scene. And then he would go on and to start out and about and everything else. But it was exactly what you're talking about of like this community, we care about each other and we're welcoming of everybody. And, it is such a nothing to say, hey, let's make sure that we show some diversity in a couple of these shots. Easy, it's not even a thought for us, So it is a cool community in that regard, and that there's all these little interesting places, even our restaurants, like my friends over at Tubby Robot. The fact that is here is so cool to me, that there's just an ice cream factory that's based around video games. That's like my childhood dream, Whereas at the same token, there's Manayunk Chambers, a great place to say. Fat Lady Brewing. There's just a million places that are so accepting and all about moving Manayunk forward in a way that doesn't feel forced, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's also like we're all just doing this for business reasons, and we want more people to come and enjoy it, And whoever the lady, the drag brunch folks that come down are hilarious.
Yeah, the Philly Drag Mafia.
Yes.
Ian Morrissey.
I have worked, Joan Denenberg over at MDC, and I have worked with them like a bunch of times, and you just laugh the whole time. Like it's a hysterical thing. Yeah. Like a bunch of comedians, it's really funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels authentic. It doesn't feel forced or, like we are doing it because it's trendy or beneficial, right? It's like we're actually people who live here in the community, and these are our businesses, and we're invested here. And how much more interesting to come to a place that has a video game, ice cream shop, or JD's Hero Complex, and like all of these just quirky, independent, unique businesses. Like that makes us a destination much more so than like having a Pottery Barn.
Yeah. Well, you're not kidding. And then also just the fact that all of us kind of had the approach of, we don't want the chains here. We want this all to be independent. Like, I remember it was a big deal when Starbucks left. We were kind of excited because it's like, oh, that was the last one. That was the last thing that wasn't an independently owned small business. This entire community is that now. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. And I'm proud to be here too. And more of this, you know. Honestly, that's the whole point of this podcast is we want to make sure people are aware of everything that's here and give people a chance to kind of, you know, broadcast their message. You know, I loved what you said about that we're here and that you live here, and, you know, who you take care of is not limited to, you know, just on the queer side. It's also creatives, it's entrepreneurs. You know, these are things that we can get out there in messages by having like regular conversations.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to keep it going and keep people talking, you know?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I think, you know, having conversations like this and speaking to the spirit of the community is really helpful. It's, you know, just puts a face and a story behind the people who live and work here.
Yeah. And you know, it's easy here. It just is. You know, it was Instagram. You want to be on this? Yeah, we're on this. We're doing this, and now we're putting this, you know, message out there. You know, and I want it to continue, and I want to make sure people know that all of us seem to be in this together. You know, like you said, like, you know, rising tides lift all sails. You know, it's true, and it you know, I think we're both proof of that. The fact that we're here and have been here for more than like 6 months. You survived a pandemic, right? I mean, a lot of us during that time, that was us kind of banding together. We had some casualties that were really unfortunate, but the ones that did go, I know where they are now, and they're doing like quite well and have made it back. But Manayunk just rules, man.
Yeah, it's a great place. And yeah, to that point, right? Like not only the tenacity of business owners, entrepreneurs, but like you were talking about, you know, the big chains, right? And myself, right? Like I have to compete against a BetterHelp, right? Like the resources that all of these, you know, big tech therapy platforms that with the pandemic sort of took advantage of, like all the VCs that rushed into that space, right? So yeah, I am just little David up against the Goliath of, you know, these platforms that, you know, make it very accessible. But again, you know, speaking to who I am and who this community is, right? Like that attracts the right kind of people, right? The people who appreciate individuality and independent businesses and keeping things within the community and supporting one another. So,
you know, I never put that together, what you just said. You're right. VCs did enter the mental health space in a big way. Wow. I never put that together. Of all those marketing dollars are coming from venture capital.
Yeah. I hear, you know, the advertisements on NPR, right?
Yep.
Everywhere. And yeah, you know, I've had clients come to me from some of those platforms. And you know, the experience is different. And I think it's similar to what we were talking about with, you know, being in this community, is that there's a very sort of personal touch, and sort of the quality of the connection that we can make, right? Like we're on Main Street, right? Like in a big city, you know, one of the biggest cities in the country, but in this small little community that feels, in some ways, a part of Philadelphia, and in some ways, sort of its very own. Its very own thing.
I never thought of that. Yeah, it is cool that we're the Main Street. There's not another Main Street,
right?
Like Market Street and Chestnut Street. That doesn't sound like Main Street. Main Street sounds like Main Street.
Yeah, and so like small town and intimate, right?
Yeah, we're all in that Manayunk Merchants chat together too. And then whenever there's a flood, like we all get the phone call. You know, so where can people find you? And what it's therapy. So I think we should just say again, like, who you feel that you can help, and also where you are physically, because most Manayunk people like want to know exactly where you are.
Yeah. So my physical space is located in a beautiful old industrial building at 106 Gay Street. And so we have different installations right on the intersection of Main Street and Gay Street there. So it's kind of a little alleyway, if you will, that's been closed off for just pedestrian use. And so there's, it's in the heart of Manayunk, right off Main Street, really accessible, right next to the train station. We've got the bike shares now too, that the station's right outside the door as well. So great physical space. I also see clients via Telehealth, licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Vermont. So folks who can't make it to Manayunk, can also meet with me on Telehealth. And yeah, I say that Intrins Inq is a wellness lifestyle studio, because I do have that background in health coaching, and with my passion about being sober curious, I like to do some events and some different programs that's a little bit more in the health coaching space for groups. I also like to make some things a little bit more accessible in terms of cost and being group oriented. So look for offerings that if you're not interested or ready for therapy, that we can kind of engage in those different ways. On Instagram, I'm pretty active there, Intrins Inq and intrinsinq.com. And if you just want to email me, it's just Justin@intrinsinq.com, INTRINSINQ. I know it's a little challenging sometimes to spell, but I had to be different. And I had to get the Q in there, right, for the queer community. So,
well, I mean, hey man, we appreciate what you're doing, and I'm glad to have someone like you in the Manayunk community. And thanks so much for doing the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks, Terry.
All right.
YUNKJunk!